Chapter 13 Bite. My steps became clumsier as the numbness crawled up my legs. I finally fell to my knees in the soft snow. A few minutes later, the crunch of snow under boots drew my attention. I rolled to look up at the trees, the falling snow, and the face of the shadow man. "Let me go," I whispered hoarsely. The white light off the snow lit his face. The scars crisscrossed his cheek in straight lines like he'd been marked on purpose. When I finally looked at his eyes, they looked back with knowing sadness. He silently bent down and scooped me up. My numb fingers couldn't even hang on to him. After 20 minutes, he deposited me back in the huge bed next to the fire. "You're taking away my choice," I whispered. "I know, but you're making the wrong one." He went to leave. "How can I make the right one if you won't tell me what's going on?" He gave me a tight frown as he turned back. "I can't. Then I'm going crazy." He left for a time. My mind kept circling. I didn't know what was going on. I felt like my mind was falling. On one point in the cycle there was a completely rational reason for all of the things that had happened, but my thoughts would cycle around until there was none. I was losing my mind. I was having a mental break and I was already locked away in a padded room. The only way out of this was clear. I had to get the people around me, the same people that my mind kept hiding from me, to kill me. The only way to do that was to become a danger to them. I stood from the comfortable bed. My body still shook with cold, but at least it shook now. My wet white t-shirt hung to my frame, leaving the pink polka-dotted bra showing through. It didn't matter. I was really tied up in a white room, constrained in one of those crazy contraptions. This was all in my mind. If I had any control whatsoever, then attacking them with enough force would require them to defend themselves and kill me. It was my only option. It was the only way I would keep from forever being trapped in an insane asylum. I pushed through the door to the living room. The shadow man lay on the couch watching TV. It was one of those survival shows. His eyes landed on my shirt. Surely it was the bra part that was showing through that drew his eye. I mentally prepared myself. I had to do this. I shrieked and ran towards him. I landed on his stomach with my knees. He released a rush of air and a strangled noise. I must have hit something sensitive. As I screamed with rage, frustration, and probably pure insanity, I also wailed on him with one hand after the other. He held his hands up to defend his face. After a few blows he grasped my wrist. His strength flowed through his fingers as he pried my arms off his face. Blood ran from his lip and nose as he pushed me back. My lungs still filled with maddened shrieks as I tried my best to be as intimidating as possible. I knew he wasn't real. I must be a fucking mess in front of the orderlies. I had to be scarier. I had to be beyond saving if I was going to be convincing enough to get murdered. I had to be a danger to myself and others. I had to try harder. "What is fucking wrong with you?" he shouted over my high-pitched shrieking. He lifted his hands and me with them until he was standing. The pain in my freshly relocated shoulder ached like mad. I could barely hear him. I continued to scream, letting my lungs release as much noise as I could, filling them and then releasing yet again. I had to do my best. I had to be rid of this hallucination. Shadow Man cocked his head at me as he held my wrists in front of me. I struggled, but to no avail. He was just so much bigger. "I am real," he said in a normal tone. I barely made it out over my screams. He scrunched his brow. "I'm not a hallucination. Baby, you're hurting yourself." I didn't relent. This seemed to irritate him. He pushed me back roughly by my hands until he had me against a wall. He shifted both my wrists to one of his hands and pinned them over my head. With the other he covered my scream. "I'm real." My screams died against his palm. There was no point in wasting the energy. I had to try something else. I struggled against him. My leg came up between his. He grunted as I just nearly missed his balls. He spun me around so fast my vertigo threatened to topple me all on its own. He pressed me against the wall with his chest, my hand still pinned above my head in one of his. "Why are you doing this? Just fucking kill me," I pleaded. "You want me to hurt you?" He sighed. "Fine, I'll fucking hurt you." With his free hand he pulled my t-shirt to the side towards my shoulder. A small ripping sound tore from it. The sane part of my mind lamented the death of another of my shirts. He lowered his mouth down to my neck. After a deep inhale, he sank his teeth down into the tender flesh. Pain and pleasure exploded through me as his teeth scraped my skin. His tongue licked the newly tender spot just as a moan escaped my lips. The noise seemed to encourage him. He bit my neck lower towards my shoulder. Another embarrassing moan burst from my lungs. His chest pressed into me, but his hips pulled away as he sucked at my skin. He continued down an inch at a time towards my shoulder until I was panting and screaming in a whole different way. After one last nip to the fleshy part of my shoulder, he stepped back, releasing his grip. I could hear his heavy breath one moment, and the next it was gone. I spun around to an empty room. My hand felt for the fresh bruises at my neck. Excitement thudded in my heart. If he was a hallucination, then maybe I was ready to give myself over to my imagination. What did I have to lose? Chapter 14 Depression. After the shadow man's disappearance, I snuggled back in the warm bed. My mind swirled with the madness. Was I crazy? Was this real? The thoughts tangled as they morphed into even crazier dreams until the morning sunlight was streaming through my window through my ratty pink curtains. I blinked against the light, realizing I was in my own bed. I shot up. Was it all just a dream? My hand went to my neck as I ran to the bathroom. I blinked hard against the fluorescent blubs. As my eyes adjusted, dark purple marks stood stark against my skin. The sigh of relief I let out rivaled one that a woman issued when seeing the negative sign on a pregnancy test. Instead, a growing tightness deeper in my guts grew as I traced the marks down my neck to my shoulder. There was even a bit of skinned areas outlined with teeth marks. I may not be crazy with hallucinations, but now maybe I was a bit crazy in a different way. That bit of madness seemed less daunting to tackle, almost exciting. I pushed it all from my mind with a deep breath. I had to get going to work. Enough of this schoolgirl silliness with a possible hallucination that left real marks. Whatever was going on, I had physical proof now. After a shower and some sort of clean clothes, I headed off to work. I shoved a bagel with cream cheese in my mouth as I walked. The sidewalk seemed a little brighter today. Was it the sun? Maybe it was the lightness I felt. I saw a man with blue hair and white eyes walking towards me on the sidewalk. I tried not to stare, but I knew he saw my eyes linger even if I couldn't tell he was looking at me. His top hat and trench coat begged for attention, yet no one on the street looked. My hand darted to my neck. Maybe this man was a hallucination. I had to check. I squeezed in closer as he passed. His coat brushed past my fingers. I still couldn't completely rule him out as a figment, but I had felt it. So either my mind was making up visual and physical, or something else impossible was going on. The more I walked, the more I looked. The more I looked, the more I saw just that, the impossible. Short, tall, wild colors and even talking animals. It was like Halloween, but where the masks were real? My heart began to stutter in my chest. What if I just accepted what I was seeing was real? What did that mean? I stopped. I rolled up the sleeve on my jacket. The angry red mark swirled up my arm. Was this part of it? If I could just entertain the idea. If I could just let myself believe in the impossible, then what? The mark let me see things that other couldn't. The shadow man was real. And he had saved me from suicide, and from the darkness. Holy crap. The darkness. It was real. I had almost let myself get killed by it like Mila. The thought made my blood run cold. Worse than that though, thoughts of Mila froze me even more. Rent. If I didn't make rent, if I didn't find a way home every night, I would be out in the dark with it. My feet started moving again. I was at the store so quick I almost ran into the locker room. I stared into the mirror on the wall, admiring the bruises on my neck. What are you looking at? The manager asked. Did you get a bug bite? I shot him a look. Did he not see them? What do you see? He shrugged. Nothing. Are you feeling okay? I couldn't choke words out. He didn't see them. I was seeing things that he wasn't. Maybe I was crazy. My stomach sunk. Yes, I muttered as I followed him out. It's great to have Mila back, isn't it? He asked. What? I stopped dead in my tracks. A platinum blonde hair, small-framed woman stood with her back to me. She turned. Kira, she said in her familiar peppy cheer. I stammered. She sprinted towards me, then pulled me into a hug. I couldn't move. She was dead. What? What the hell? They let me out of the hospital on good behavior. She laughed. I thought I would come and surprise everyone at work. My mouth worked at silent words. I could even manage a squeak. Her lips pouted. You didn't visit me at the hospital. She slapped my cheek playfully. But that's okay. I know how you are about hospitals after your mom. Come on, let's start another day together. She grabbed my hand and pulled me after. I couldn't get over my shock. I worked the cashier counter with such wooden movements and a robotic voice that the patrons were asking me if I was okay. I couldn't take my eyes off the blonde the next counter over. The back of her hair was the same as ever. She sounded her normal peppy and cheerful self, but something about her movements gave me that uncanny feeling you get when you see a too real-looking robot. My mind swirled. I was crazy. I had made all this up. My shift neared its end. Mila had gotten off an hour earlier. I had seen countless odd-looking people, but no one but me turned ahead. Mila was alive and I was seeing weird-ass things. At least rent would be paid. One problem solved, and now I was faced with an unsolvable one. I entered the locker room. I again was the last one to leave. The darkness waited for me outside. I was crazy. Mila was alive and I had nothing to hold on to. I stared in the mirror. Where had these bruises on my neck come from? I locked the door and faced the dreaded empty parking lot. My mind had made all this up. I was going to be as crazy as my mother. I had nothing to live for. I was nothing. I am nothing. I will always be nothing. I stepped into the darkness. There was nothing to fear now. I was the only thing to fear. I was lost. I was alone. I had even made up some crazy man to save me from myself. I could feel it behind me, the darkness. My throat tightened. My body shivered. It was following me. It was right there behind me. It was me. The cold tingling sensations crawled up my ankles, slowing my steps. The wall of dark clouds pressed in around me. My body freaked. I ran. The darkness wrapped around my ankles, pulling me down. I tripped as I ran. The pavement came at me full force, tearing into my last pair of intact slacks. It covered me, swallowing me in deep waves of dark clouds. Everything went black as my vertigo swam. I didn't know which way was up as I thrashed. I couldn't feel the ground anymore. I felt like I was falling even as I slowed my movements. My stomach knotted with queasiness. I didn't know how long I fell. It felt eternal. It felt like I was falling in the depths of an ice-cold volcano. And I must have actually been falling because the floor hit me hard. My lungs spasmed as the air was knocked loose from them. I rolled to my hands and knees. The floor felt cold beneath my palms as I gasped for breath. The cold darkness lifted. Faint orange light filtered through the haze. I lifted my eyes, forcing them to adjust. It was more than darkness, but at the same time so much less. The emptiness around me echoed forever. Only the stone beneath me gave it substance. When my lungs recovered, I stumbled to my feet. Without anything to focus on, my vision swam, throwing me dangerously off balance. Kira. A familiar female voice sang. Why was it so familiar? Kira. It spoke again, and I realized it wasn't singing but echoing. I spun around. A figure coalesced in the distance. I would have recognized it anywhere. The luxurious curly hair framed her exquisite figure. She glided towards me. Montag. Mother. I exhaled. Yes, my dearest. I must have lost my mind completely. Or this was a dream, right? She glided closer to me. Her beautiful features sharpened at her approach. My dearest, you have to save her. Who? Her hand reached out and cupped the side of my cheek. Her hands were ice cold. Mila. Mila. My mind raced. I felt so hazy. The memory of my dead friend being pulled into the darkness suddenly struck me so hard I couldn't breathe. Yes, my dear, sweet Mila. You must save her. But she's back. Isabel cocked her head to the side. Is she? My brow furrowed. That wasn't Mila, was it? She was all wrong. Mother nodded. Look for the man in black. He will lead you to the items you need to save her. You must perform the ritual to bring her back. The man in black, I murmured, thinking of the mysterious shadow man. Mother started to drift away. Wait. I called after her. Mother. Find him. Save your friend. Her figure faded from view. My vision swam. I lost my balance and fell to the floor. But the floor wasn't there. I fell and fell, my eyes desperately grasping for something to orient myself, but nothing appeared. The orange light faded and the cold darkness enveloped me. Chapter 15. Shower. Sunlight streamed through the tattered pink curtains. I ran my hand over my face. I had a terrible headache, one that felt like lightning had cracked a boulder. I rolled out of bed in search of water. I stumbled to the bathroom, then gulped the cold liquid straight from the tap. The terrible dream struck me as I stared at my wet face in the mirror. I was still dressed in my work smock with the fresh holes torn in my knees. Was that just a dream? How had I gotten home? The angry red line spiraling up my right arm faded into black as I watched. I blinked. What the hell? No. No, no, no. I was losing it. I was losing my mind. I screamed, a blood-curdling maniac scream. It echoed off the bathroom walls and probably woke up any neighbor still sleeping. My mind went white and my body reacted. I ran. I don't even remember making it to the street, but my feet carried me there. I sprinted past people, but I didn't see them. I ran across traffic, but didn't hear their horns. I just ran. I ran away from all this crazy, from this ridiculousness. My feet flew, my breath dragged into my lungs in gasping gulps, but I felt nothing. My mind was too far gone. I ran and ran and ran. Crazy. My mind repeated over and over. I clasped my hands over my ears. I ran from the crazy. I couldn't tell you for how long I ran, but slowly my legs gave way. I fell into the dirt. And yet I still ran. My mind ran from the nonsense it had thought up. There was no way any of this was true, not even a little bit. I clawed at the dirt, crawling on my belly away from it. There had to be an escape. I would not end up like my mother. I hesitated. My hand went to my face in the memory of her cold touch. Was she real? Was she just a construct of my imagination? No, it was nonsense. It was crazy. I clawed forward again, but this time I hit something hard. My eyes lifted. A boot. I had hit a boot. The failing light around me was shadowed by a dark figure connected to this boot. The man crouched, his face shadowed by the light behind him. He offered me a hand. You look like you need some help, he said. His voice was deep and gravelly. It was familiar, but I couldn't remember it. I froze. I stared at the hand. Thoughts wouldn't come to my brain. I couldn't even summon enough thought to take the hand offered. He knelt before me, bringing his boot away from my hand as he did so. He took up my hand in his. It was warm. I stared at it. Thoughts were coming back in slow spurts. What must he think of me? What must I look like right now? Certainly I looked as crazy as I felt. He squeezed my hand to get my attention. My eyes lifted. The light behind him dimmed as the sun set. His eyes burned golden hazel. There was something familiar about them, but I couldn't place it. Do you think you can sit up? He asked. I blinked, then very slowly pulled my legs up underneath me. I sat facing him in the shiny sunset. He was a dark figure in front of me holding my hand. He drew small circles over my hand where the thumb connected to the fingers. Are you okay? He asked. I looked down. Blood soaked my slacks. My knees were bloody open wounds matted with dirt. My face and shirt were soaked with sweat. I smelled worse than a manure pile. Tears began to fall. The tears I had begged to fall the night before finally released in small trickles down my face. I shook my head very slowly as I stared down at our connected hands. That's all right. It's okay to not be okay sometimes. That just made me cry more. When people acted like they cared about me, it always made it worse. Why couldn't they just leave me be and let me cry it out alone? It was how life was meant to be. Instead, this stranger put a hand on my shoulder. The tears poured from my eyes, but I held my face still. I wasn't going to bawl in front of him. You've always been so strong. Why don't you let me help you, Kira? Kira. He knew my name? I couldn't get more thoughts out as the tears overwhelmed me. My face contorted and I turned away. He wrapped an arm around me and held me to his chest. I fought it at first, but I had no strength. I sagged into him. He smelled of sulfur and charcoal. Why was that familiar? I heaved out all the sadness, all the crazy, until there was nothing left. I was an empty shell. I was nothing. I had emptied out all feeling and now I was nothing. He cradled me in his arms. After a moment I realized we were no longer in the fading light in the middle of a field. We were instead on a navy blue couch in front of a burning fire. I looked around. How? I whispered, my eyes seeking his. His smile was warm, but he didn't answer. He patted me on the head. Another familiar gesture for some reason. Do you feel better now? He brushed the streak of tears from one side of my face. I could feel the dirt smear against it. I don't feel anything, I whispered. You always say that. My eyebrows furrowed. What? He shook his head. Never mind, how about we get you cleaned up? Can you stand? I climbed off his lap hurriedly. My legs felt like pudding as I tried to stand. They shook violently. He caught me mid-collapse. I'm sorry. That's okay. You had a pretty hard run before I caught up to you. He scooped me up in his arms in one fluid motion and carried me to the bathroom. He set me on the closed toilet and started the hot water to the bathtub. You were following me? I asked. He cocked his head to the side in that half-smile again. I always do. My face contorted in a scowl. I wasn't sure if I wasn't understanding him, or if he was toying with me. I still felt hazy, so I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. When the tub was half full, he picked me up and set me clothes and all into the warm water. He knelt down until his face was in front of me again. Get cleaned up and I will make us some dinner. He patted me on the head, then left. I gaped after him. What the hell was going on? I lifted my raw hands. Dirt and blood stained the creases. My feet stung. I had lost my socks at some point. I apparently hadn't left the house with shoes either. I stripped off the dirty, sopping wet clothing and balled them up into the corner of the tub. I scrubbed the raw skin clean. The water was brown and red. Chunks of dirt and debris floated around me. I was sure I was cleaner, but I wasn't clean yet. I pulled the plug, hoping it wouldn't clog the drain. I started the shower. My left arm still hurt from the car accident, so I turned it with my right. I let the rest of the dirt run off of me as I sat in the middle of the tub. I scrubbed at my hair with the hair products in the shower. When I finished, I smelled like a clean man. I shut the water off and pulled myself up to the edge of the tub where I dried myself. The towel still came back with small particles of dirt and fresh blood. I frowned. He probably shouldn't have left me a white towel. Chapter 16: The Veil. I dried my hair and wrapped myself in the towel before I tested my legs again. They were completely cramped. I tumbled and caught myself on the toilet before I went down all the way. Hey, mister. I called through the closed door. A moment of panic struck me. He was a complete stranger. He could do anything to me because I couldn't run away. I was in the worst position possible. I had to at least look like I could defend myself. Kira, is everything okay? I sat up straight. I hoped I at least looked tough enough to fight him. Well, that was complete bunk. If he was going to do something to me, there wasn't a damn thing I would be able to do about it. The door cracked open. Are you okay? Yeah, I think I'm done. Okay, 1 second. He disappeared. A moment later he set a pair of sweatpants, a t-shirt, and a sweatshirt on the edge of the counter. They won't fit you, but at least it's something, he said, then closed the door. Thank you. I called through the door. I leaned across the counter and pulled the clothes on. No underwear, but the sweatshirt at least covered anything that might peek through the thin t-shirt. I tested my legs again but still couldn't stand. Damn it. What had I done to myself? How was I this pathetic? Tears threatened me again, but I swallowed them back. Mister, I called. The man cracked the door. Are you decent? Yes. He swung the door open. His leather jacket was gone. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt tight against his muscular frame. I knew I shouldn't stare, but I couldn't help it. Are you okay? My eyes jerked up to his. Yes. I just still can't stand. He nodded and scooped me up again. His tight muscles pressed against me as he walked us to the table. My heart thumped so loudly I was afraid he could hear it. If he did, he didn't say anything. He opened the bathroom door to the rest of the cabin. The house was small. It seemed made up of a small kitchen with attached dining room that held a table and 2 chairs. The living room held a small fireplace and a huge TV. A door on the other side lay open to what looked to be the bedroom with black sheets. Why did that look familiar? There were numerous windows, all dark with the night sky. He set me at the table. The thick stew smelled exquisite. I hadn't eaten such food since I had left home 3 years ago. He sat across from me and waited. Please go ahead. He set his chin in his hand as he watched me. I looked at him sheepishly before taking a small bite of the stew. The meat was grand. I had no other words. It was just grand. He was watching me, and whatever he saw in my expression he liked because he gave a wide grin. He nodded approval of my expression and then began eating. I continued with bigger bites. My stomach protested, but my tongue wouldn't stop. I finished every drop. Quite the appetite, he said as he leaned over the table and dished out more of the delicious stew into my bowl. My mind flickered to safety again. He could have poisoned this, and in moments I would be out on the floor. He could do anything he wanted to me. I eyed him as he ate his stew. Again, something familiar in his movements bothered me. Why did I feel like I knew him? I pushed a few more mouthfuls onto my demanding tongue before I set my spoon down. Who are you? I blurted. The man stopped mid-bite and set his spoon back down. He cocked his head to the side, watching me again. Guess. What? If you want to know, you have to guess. That's how the veil works. My eyes narrowed. He was just making me ask more questions. Maybe he was biding his time before the poison kicked in. I looked down at the soup, but it was just so damn delicious. If I was going to die, then this stew was my choice of death. Just guess the first thing that pops into your head. I've never been good at games. Well, that's because you have all the bad karma, but that's another story. What? My head pounded. Oh my God, why couldn't he just be straight with me? Come on, just guess a letter. This isn't luck this time. You know this. What? Do it. Just guess a random letter. Whatever pops into your mind. I rolled my eyes. How absurd. Right. My eyes bugged a little. Now guess my name. All their names I could think of popped into my head. None of them felt right. Roger Rickerimus. I stared at his face. Remy. Very good. How did I know that? I stared at him, then down at the bowl of soup. Maybe this was magic stew. We've met before many times actually. But the veil keeps you from remembering. It won't stick unless you come up with it. My headache was slowly creeping up the back of my neck. I shook my head. What? He sighed. Look, I would explain it all to you, but you won't remember it. So here's the short version. I'm your guardian demon. I've always been a part of your life. When I tell you my name, you always forget me the moment I leave your sight. I squinted at him. My hands came up and covered my eyes. I removed them. Remy. Yes. Why didn't I forget just now? Because I came up with your name, or because you are speaking utter nonsense? Remy shrugged. I'm just telling you how it seems to work. It's your choice what you believe. I pushed some of the meat around in the stew with a spoon. Guardian demon. Like a guardian angel. Remy scoffed. Do not put me in the same category as those good-for-nothing bag of feathered-brained. The last bit trailed off a little as if he had more names for them, but cared not to share all of it. So shouldn't guardian demons do like bad stuff? Not like a guardian though. Keep working through it. If I tell you, then you won't remember. I scrunched my nose. How was I supposed to know something I didn't know? Think about the point of a guardian angel. He's supposed to save you, right? But why? I shrugged. To keep me from dying. But if your soul is going to heaven, then why would he save you? I stopped pushing the stew around with my spoon. Why would he save me? Well, I guess if my soul wasn't going to heaven, he would save me until he thought I was good enough. And so, guardian demon. He gestured with his spoon to go on. Mine splashed in the soup as I dropped it. A guardian demon would save me until he thought my soul was bad enough to go to hell. Bingo, Remy said and scooped another bite into his mouth. And I know all this, I just don't remember this. Remy nodded. Because of the veil. It erases everything. Everything weird, so I don't remember it. Because magic isn't supposed to exist. I was starting to connect strands of thoughts together. It felt so weird, like I knew it, but at the same time I just never thought of it before. For humans, he added. He pushed away from the table and stood. How many times have we had this conversation? Remy shook his head. We've never spent this much time together. But I have explained it to you a few times over the years. How many years? Your whole life. He walked over to me and stooped next to my chair. The way he looked at me made me a little uncomfortable. It was almost like adoration. I stared at him. Pony cart accident, age 5. Bicycling accident, age 6. Near-miss car accident, age 12. Tractor accident, age 15. Almost lost your fingers in that one. Yesterday you jumped off a bridge. I did. How come I didn't remember yesterday? I remembered. The bruises. Did you do this to me? I pulled the sweatshirt away from my neck. He chuckled but didn't answer. I thought back to each other item. Each time I had been miraculously saved somehow. Each time he had been the one to save me. How? No, I knew. He was telling the truth. Wait, so my soul is good? You're just keeping me alive until I'm bad? That's terrible. That's my job. I don't really have a choice. He took up my hand in his. But I really don't want you to die. Can you please stop trying to kill yourself? You're not crazy. Weird images of the bridge and sensations of cold water flashed through my mind. They felt like memories, but I didn't feel like I could trust them. Besides, Remy's warm hand around mine was distracting me. I fought the sudden urge to throw myself at him. The longer I held his hand, the more thoughts that bubbled up. I didn't even think these things were real. I remember being in a bank and sneaking around with him. I remembered holding his hand in a truck. I remembered the feel of his soft lips as they brushed mine. I squeezed my eyes shut. There was no way any of that was possible. My mind really was out of whack. I focused on his last words. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't crazy. I'm not crazy, I whispered. His hand squeezed mine. He began drawing small circles on my hand with his thumb. Why did I find that so soothing? I ventured a peek at him. His lips twitched up in a smile at one side. I had the feeling he knew a lot that he wasn't telling me. He pulled on my hand just a little bit, as if inviting me down to him. Before I gave my mind the command, my body was climbing into his lap on the floor. I straddled him. His hands moved up my thighs towards my hips. My body screamed for more, but my mind was freaking out. What the hell was I doing? Well, whatever it was, it felt fantastic and my body seemed to know what it wanted. Remy pushed his fingers into the soft flesh of my hips. His body responded, hardening beneath mine. I blushed, but I couldn't stop myself. It's like my body knew his. I leaned forward, my breasts pressed against his chest lightly. Do we always do this? I whispered in his ear. My lips trembled. I wanted so much to suck on it. He didn't say anything. I could feel him breathing hard. His hand slipped from my hip to my sides. My lips closed the distance, brushing his neck, then licking it. I heard him murmur something low, almost like a growl. It sounded like he said, "Lanie." At that moment, the door to the house flew open. I jumped out of Remy's lap, landing painfully on my Chapter 17 The World. "Remy, where is she?" A tall man with golden hair bellowed. "You could at least knock," Remy muttered. "She's fine." He stood, brushing at his pants. I tried not to stare at his bulging zipper. I was failing at that. "There she is. We need to get her back. She shouldn't be out of the world." He barely glanced at me and spoke to Remy as if I was some sort of object. "Engandriel, she is exactly where she wants to be." He looked down at me sitting on the floor. "You don't want to go back, do you?" I looked over to Engandriel. There was something familiar about him too. I followed the thread of thought. Wait. He had been Anton that first night he'd come to rescue me. It hadn't been the real Anton. It was like my mind had been overwritten, and now that I could see his face clearly, he didn't look anything like him. "Anton." The man glared at me. Remy laughed. "Man, she saw right through you. But you look nothing like Mila's brother. How did you?" "The veil rewrote him in your memory. He just looked like Anton so he could check on you." He leaned over and whispered behind his hand, not any quieter. "He's not very good at hiding." Engandriel glared at him. "Stop telling her lies." "It doesn't matter what I tell her. The veil will wipe it away anyways." "I just wanted some company," Remy said. "Charges are not company." Engandriel marched forward and grabbed my arm. He wasn't harsh about it, but he did insist. "Come on, Kira. You can't be out of the world like this. It's not good for your soul." "Does it make me bad?" I asked as I attempted to stand. My stiff legs buckled. I sagged against his grasp. He held me up by one arm, not even slightly off balance by my weight. I hung limply in his grasp. "Yes," he stated as he looked down at me. He picked me up with one arm and marched out of the house. He didn't even bother closing the door. "Remy," I shouted, looking back over the angel's shoulder. Remy stood in the door. "It's okay. When you get back, just call my name if you remember me." Engandriel continued his march forward. The surrounding forest was covered in snow, which was odd for a summer day. But I guessed if I was out of the world that could be normal, right? I was getting this weird sense of déjà vu. Engandriel squatted low, then launched into the air. White feathered wings burst from his back. I wasn't even shocked. Maybe I was just getting used to all the weird stuff that kept happening. He pumped them up and down until we gained so much height that I couldn't see the house below. "So, you're my guardian angel?" He remained silent as he flew. "I take that as a yes. And your name is Ongan." "Angelan Angie. Engandriel," he stated. "Angie got it, okay? And once you put me back in the world, I won't remember any of this." He gave an ever so slight nod. Maybe it was just a normal part of flying, but I took that as a yes. "So, do you have to put me back in the same spot as I started? Do you think you can just take me home?" Angie narrowed his eyes. "Good, that would be great. Thanks." He flew for a long time. I didn't see the sun anywhere, but it seemed to get brighter somehow. We flew on. The wind was starting to chill me, but the heat from Angie's body was warm. He wore some strange metal arm cuffs, a breastplate, and a metal pleated skirt. The whole thing looked utterly absurd and stereotypical. His golden hair was shoulder length and his bright blue eyes were hard as stone. If he had any emotions, it was impossible to read it in his face. "Quit starting at me," he said. I didn't look away. "When will we get there?" "Soon." How did Remy get me to his place so quickly? His lower left eyelid ticked to the left. I laughed. "You don't like Remy? I thought he was nice." The eye ticked again. I chuckled to myself. "Brace yourself. We are coming up on the world now. You're going to feel some pressure." He flew towards the shimmering barrier. As he approached, he slowed as if the air here had gotten thicker and harder to fly through. I took a deep breath as we pushed through it. Immediately, all my worries came back. Rent, Mila, Anton, my car, my injuries. Every muscle in my body ached. My head felt like it was going to split open at any second. I sucked in a breath to avoid screaming. "We're almost there," he said. He flew right over the streets, past people walking to their jobs and traffic. No one gave us a second glance. I guess this was the veil at work, erasing anything weird from their minds. He flew right up to my balcony and forced the door open. He set me on the futon next to the real Anton. "Be a good girl now. No more trouble." Angie, wait. Angie stopped as he faced the door. His golden hair shimmered in the light. I don't know what you've done for me in the past, and I know I won't remember you, but thank you for everything. I know you've saved my life too. Angie gripped the door tightly. I'm just doing my job, little one. His wings sprouted out when he was clear of the balcony. I watched him fly off down the street and disappear from view. As soon as he disappeared, my head felt fuzzy. Anton's snores drew my attention. I looked over at the clock. I was going to be late for work. I really shouldn't have been out all night drinking. Chapter 18 Plan. I held my head in my hands between my knees. My head was killing me. What had I been doing? I didn't feel like puking and my stomach was warm and full, but God, did my body hurt. I turned my head and looked out the sliding glass door as the rising sun sent beams of glowing light reflecting through the windows. Something about it reminded me of golden hair. I blinked hard. It didn't matter. I had a job to do. It was Saturday, my day for the early shift. I slowly sat up and then attempted to stand. My knees gave way. I barely caught myself on the edge of the daybed. Anton grumbled and rolled over. He let out a ripping fart. I stumbled across the room to get away from it, coughing and choking on the air. How long was that freeloader going to be stinking up our apartment? I would have to talk to Mila about it. Mila. That was snow. Everything was fine. Just too much to drink was all. I must have been pre-partying for my upcoming birthday again. Why did I keep blacking out from it? I leaned heavily on the wall as I heaved my body one painful step at a time down the hall. I pushed open the door to find Mila asleep on my bed. At least it was better than her stinky brother. I continued my march to the bathroom. The bright lights over the mirror illuminated the angry red lines coursing up my arms. Those marks, they were a tattoo? I twisted my right arm back and forth looking at the swirling double lines. They were a scar? I moved my aching left arm in a circle. That car accident had certainly done a number on it. I paused. Blood. No blood. The red on my arm pulsed with black for a moment. I blinked. Mila. The door burst open next to me. Sup? Anton gave me a head nod as he walked past. He unzipped his pants and started whizzing right next to me. I sighed loudly. How long are you going to be around? How long is rent paid? He asked. The feeling of déjà vu settled on me so heavily I couldn't reply for a moment. The air was filled with only the sound of his extremely long pee and a faint smell of urine. When he finished, he zipped up his pants and left the bathroom. I stood staring at the mirror as the feeling passed. What was I thinking again? Rent? I shrugged and started the shower. After the daily ritual, I was out the door and dragging my tired legs down the sidewalk. My heavy tote bag over my arm banged my side with every step. Creatures and odd-looking people caught my eye. I did a double take, but the second look I would just see a normal person. I must have been slipped some sort of weird drug at a party last night. No more pre-birthday drinking for me. I didn't know if I could handle much more of this. I unlocked the back door to the store. Why did I even go out drinking last night? I didn't normally go out if I had to work early the next morning. That wasn't a good decision. Mila must have coerced me. Mila. Rem. Good morning, Kira, the manager said as he walked in the back door. Good morning, I greeted. I closed my locker fast and went about the task of opening up the store. I didn't like being stuck alone with him. Something about his gave me the creeps. Sometimes out of the corner of my eye, I'd see his eyes turn completely black. I dismissed the idea. That was absurd. The Saturday morning rush settled in quickly. My lane was so jam-packed with customers, I couldn't even remember if I asked them the standards questions. In fact, I might have even asked each of them twice. I saw Mila bounce in around noon. She was odd, like too bouncy, like she was not touching the ground, almost as if she was floating. I squeezed my eyes. I must need a break. I pressed the button. Another cashier stepped in and took over my lane. I headed to the locker room. Mila smiled and waved cheerfully. I nodded back and kept moving. She was stiff, maybe? Was that it? I shot one look back over my shoulder. She was watching me, then she grinned. It took up too much of her face. It showed all her teeth. And her eyes. They bulged. I blinked. Mila wasn't even looking at me, she was helping a customer. I guess I was just seeing things. There was no one else in the break room when I got there. I sat heavily at the table after grabbing a yogurt out of the fridge. Did I really see her grin like that? Were her teeth pointed? The image held steady in my mind. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't banish it. I left my half-eaten yogurt on the table as I got up to go to the restroom. The private break room restroom was just off the main room. I locked the door. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at myself. Maybe I was just tired. I did look pale. And when did I get these red marks on my arms? I tilted my head to the side. Were those bruises on my neck? I traced my fingers along each purple and green mark. Some had teeth marks. The image of a dark-haired man with golden eyes flashed in my mind.
Richard, no.
Roger. Remy, I whispered. The red marks flared golden. My mind swirled. The bruises, the running, the bridge, Mila. The darkness. I remembered it all. Mila was being worn like a suit by the darkness. A cold shiver descended on me. I felt the darkness press in even in the bright restroom. A firefly of light reflected in the mirror. Spoon. Remy, I said to the shadow man leaning against the door. His mouth quirked up at one side. So you do remember my name. I remember it all. How do you know you remember all of it if you can't remember what you forgot? Cut the crap. My mother said you know how to help me save Mila. Remy lifted his chin in a large nod. I see, so you do remember something. Come on, spill before the veil rewrites my memory again. He shrugged. All right, just calm down. If you want to banish the darkness from Mila, you need two things. He held up a finger. 1, the blood of your father. He held up the second finger. 2, the blood of your mother. Then you'll preform this spell and the darkness will be banished from Mila. I quirked an eyebrow. That's it. Can you give me more details? What's the spell? It is like real magic stuff. He shook his head. Even if I tell you now, you'll just forget. He closed the distance between us. Besides, he whispered in a sexy growl, I like it when you call my name. Goosebumps ran up my spine. The memory of his fingers on my hips and his lips on my neck drew a blush to my cheeks, but I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to help my friend first. Besides, wasn't he a demon? Why the blood of my father and mother? What does that have to do with Mila? Does it give me power or something? Remy shrugged. Hell if I know. I'm not a witch. I just relay the messages. A witch? Like witchcraft. My eyebrows scrunch. All of this just seemed like so much nonsense. I had a scientific mind and none of this, absolutely none of this made any sense. He shrugged again. He leaned in closer. I could smell the charcoal of him. He pulled a bit of my blonde hair away from my face and to the side. There was something in his eyes that held me still. It was like a deep sadness that didn't reflect his actions towards me. He was half caring father, half horny boyfriend. And yet behind it all there was something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A knock came at the door drawing my attention. Remy and his shadows vanished. I didn't even see it change. It was just back to normal. 1 second, I said, probably way too late. I opened the door to a smiling Mila. Her smile seemed normal but her eyes seemed too big, like the way the Barbie doll's eyes have changed from when I was a kid. Too big and too creepy. Oh, Mila. Kira. She stepped forward and hugged me. It was not an uncommon thing for her to do, but I had to fight off a full body shudder as her arms wrapped around me and her small frame held me. There was something so wrong about it all. This wasn't my best friend. This thing wasn't even human, this was something else. I tried my best to pat her on the back. Hey Mila, I think I'm going to take a few days off. I'm not feeling well. Oh, do you want me to make you some soup when I get home?
No.
It's not that. I think I'm just a little homesick. I was thinking of taking a trip to visit home. She stepped back and assessed me. I thought you said you were never going back there? Her voice had a little heat to it. I guess whatever held her had read her memories too. But Mila would never say anything mean to me, not in that tone. I did, but I guess I just need to be more careful when I say the word never. Well, maybe I can come with you? We can make it a road trip. If this had been the real Mila, she would be jumping up and down singing about snacks and making plans already. She wouldn't be standing here watching me and waiting for my response. That would be a lot of fun, I said hesitantly, but I really don't think we should leave your brother alone in our apartment. Besides, I'm not on good terms with my family. I think it's best if I go on my own. Sorry. Mila didn't look down and dejected like I would expect. Instead she just shrugged and nodded. Okay bestie, whatever you say. I stood looking at her as she looked at me. She must have suspected that I knew she wasn't Mila. I really do need to pee though, she said. Oh right, sure. I got out of the way. Of course that's what she wanted. Maybe I was just reading into this a little too much. I checked in with the creepy manager and informed him of the vacation days I would be taking. He grumbled a bit but let me go. After my shift, I grabbed my heavy tote from my locker then pushed open the back door. The Orange Hornet's engine revved high. Mila waved at me from the driver's seat. Hey bestie, she shouted over the engine. I heaved a heavy sigh. I don't know how she got the dang thing to run or how I was going to get through this trip. I plastered on a smile and entered the car. It was going to be an interesting ride. Chapter 19 Road Trip. I sat in the passenger side of the Hornet staring out the window. We were loaded up with snacks for the 12-hour-long road trip to my hometown. It didn't take long to pack or to leave the city, not like it was a big city for that matter, but way more sizable than where I came from. Rolling green fields passed by our car, and with it came the stench of cow manure. If you stayed in it long enough you didn't notice the smell, but after being gone so long it was so overpowering I wanted to gag. As I stared I watched the shadows. That is where I always saw him with his glowing red ember. I wondered what it was. It looked like just a glowing ball of light. Maybe it was an enchanted firefly. Since I was dealing with the unknown here, maybe it was a fairy. Mila sat in the driver's seat singing along to the tune on the radio. It's not like the Hornet had an AUX port or anything, just a broken tape player. She seemed her happy self, but her eyes were too big, her face too stretched, and her grin too wide. Whatever was pulling her strings was wearing her like a suit. It made me uncomfortable just to watch her. I wondered how I was going to get free of her. Did she know why I was going home? Did she know I wanted to banish the thing inside her? The thought made me shudder. Maybe I was just crazy after all. She was actually just my best friend and I was seeing things. My heart wanted it so much that it almost made my head believe. Almost. Are you excited to go home? She asked. I shook my head. Not really. Then why are you going? I had been thinking over this answer since I got in the car. Because I was crazy? Because she was possessed? Because a dream and a man told me to? I sighed. After the car accident, I got to thinking that I really should mend some bridges with my family. So this is a death scare visit, she stated. I shrugged. Sure. It was as good an answer as any. That was some accident, huh? I flew like 20 feet. She laughed. My memories of the car accident felt like I had seen it in a movie. Maybe that was the difference between the real and the veil. I don't remember her flying through the air. I don't remember running to her side, but I know it happened. Or at least I know I am supposed to think it happened. I stared down at the angry red lines on my forearm. They flickered black as night. I did remember screaming, then pulling on her dead body. I remembered the darkness. Those were real. Those didn't feel like a movie. I shuddered. Are you cold? She asked as she leaned towards the heat controls. I waved her off. No, imukai. I just remembered seeing you lying on the pavement is all. I don't ever want to see that again. A loud snore emanated from the back seat. Why did he have to come along again? I asked. Did you really want to leave him alone in our apartment all weekend? Mila asked. Good point. I turned around and shoved a bag of chips in Anton's face. Hey Snorty, shut up. Anton's fingers closed around the chips. Thanks, Snarky. I turned back around. Do you think he was actually sleeping, or he was just looking for attention? Mila shrugged. It's anyone's guess. Anton popped the chip bag open. The sound of his teeth crunching into the chips made me grate my teeth. So, do your folks make really good food? They're farmers, right? Anton asked. Well, my brother cooks and my dad. He'll probably just shoot all of us on sight, so I wouldn't expect too much hospitality, I said. What did you do? Anton asked. I shot a glance at him. He seemed genuinely interested. I went to college. I take it that was a problem? He wanted me to stay and take over the family business. But it gets worse, I dropped out. So, I don't have much to show for it. Anton whistled. That sucks. I sighed and laid the side of my head against the window. I felt stuck. And in more than one way. I was stuck with creepy puppet Mila and her idiot brother. I was stuck in a dead-end job with no future in sight. I was stuck in debt. I was stuck in trouble with my family. I was stuck with this crappy car. I looked down at the angry red lines on my arm. The only time I felt anything else was when I was with Remy. Things were scary and exciting. They were dangerous, I kept going crazy. The red lines on my arm flashed inky black as memories flashed through my mind. These markings kept the veil at bay somehow. It wouldn't let them get rewritten or erased. I felt the sudden urge to talk to him, to know he was real. I need to pee, I said. Ooh, I second that, Anton said as he set down an empty 2-liter of Mountain Dew. All right, next gas station I see we'll stop, Mila said. In another 3 exits, we were parked at the fuel pump in a travel stop. Mila went into the store. Anton headed to the men's restroom. I ducked into the family/wheelchair accessible bathroom when no one was looking and locked the door. It was spacious with a single toilet, sink and a mirror. Remy, I whispered. Remy. Shadows darkened the room. His deep gravelly voice came from the corner. Yes. I spun to face him. What am I doing? You seem to be on a road trip. He crossed his arms over his chest as he leaned against the wall. I know that, but seriously, what am I doing? Do I really stab my dad and get his blood? Remy laughed. I mean, sure, that's one way to get the job done. Can it just be DNA? Can I just get his hair and be done with it? He shook his head. For this spell, it needs to be blood. And now we're talking about spells. Geez, now I know I'm crazy. I'm happy to help with that again. My hand went to my neck. I had to stop myself from saying yes. What was wrong with me? Oh right, my life sucked. Remy closed in. I could smell the charcoal on him. He set his hand on the side of my head and caressed my hair, then pulled away a stray lock with his thumb. It was such a loving move, I froze. I didn't even know this guy, and yet he knew me. He knew me from the day I was born. I looked up into his golden hazel eyes. He was like an uncle or almost like a father, but he was also like a boyfriend. I felt so confused. My heart didn't know how to feel. Did you watch me get born? I blurted out. Remy removed his hand and coughed awkwardly. Yeah, I did. Is that when you were assigned to me? I mean, a little before that, I guess. How many other people do you look after? He shrugged. I have about 150 charges right now. My hands went to my hips. Do you hit on all of them? He chuckled. Are you jealous?
No.
Yes. You saw my mother squirt me out and then you're all like, wait, how old are you? He gave a half smile. I'm old, but time doesn't really work the same for me. I just kind of am now. What do you mean now? What were you before? He shook his head in exasperation, then wrapped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his chest. Little one, you are too smart for your own good. I have answered these questions before. Maybe we can talk about it again someday, but not today. He kissed the top of my head. Now go stab your daddy so we can get the next piece. Don't call me until you have it. If I'm in your world too long, then bird brains will get nosy. He stepped back and gave me a wink. The shadows disappeared in him with Chapter 20. Home Sweet Home. By early morning, I was driving the Hornet down the familiar gravel driveway to my old house. The cows were already milked and traveled in a herd, as they headed out to a green place to graze in the summer sun. The days would get shorter soon, almost unnoticeable until fall. It would happen just after solstice, my birthday. That was only a few days away. The memory of the darkness taking Mila made me shudder again. I stole a glance at her. She was still humming merrily as she looked out the window. Are we there yet? Anton grumbled. Just about a mile, I said. My back is killing me from sleeping in the car at that rest stop, he complained as he stretched. Oh, quit whining, Mila said. You've been sleeping since we got in the car last night. Yeah, but it was daylight until almost 10. Do you think your folks will have breakfast ready? Again, I don't have folks. I have a brother and a father. Yeah, whatever. Will they have food ready? How am I supposed to know? I eased the brake pedal down as the farmhouse came into view. It was dusty but looked to be in good repair. As the car pulled up, the screen door opened. The figure of my father stepped through the door. He shaded his eyes with his hand as he peered hard at my car. I could see a frown deepening the creases on his face. I put the old car in park and killed the engine. My hands shook. Mila reached over and grabbed my arm. I flinched so hard I smacked my hand on the steering wheel. Mila smiled softly. It's okay. I'm sure he still loves you very much. I tried a smile, but it came out a grimace. I just hoped she didn't realize I was flinching because of her, not my father. Father stood at the top of the steps on the porch with his hands on his hips. His dark eyes stared at me from a weathered face. He looked so much older and more tired than I remembered. He was still thick and corded with muscle, but everything about him seemed aged longer than the 3 years I had been gone. I could feel both Mila and Anton's eyes on me. I knew it was my move, but I didn't know if I could do it. I told him I would never come back, and if it weren't for this whole darkness thing, I wouldn't be here. It was all a lie. Everything I was about to say to my father was a lie. Would he even buy it? I guess I just had to say what he expected to hear. That was my best bet. I released the seatbelt. It jammed, but with enough wiggling it set me free. The door opened with a protesting grind of the hinges until there I stood, facing my father. Papa, I said. Akriana, he said. I came to visit. As can be seen, the tension was heavy in the air. Who are these people? He asked. My friends. The silence spanned uncomfortably. Can I come in? He stared at me hard. I could feel him sizing me up. Finally he gave a nod and turned his back to me. What does that mean? Mila whispered over top the car. It means we follow. I closed the car door. The metal door clanged shut with a resounding ring, like the bell of a wrestling match. The fight had begun. I walked up the steps of the wooden porch. The familiar knock of my shoes against the wood brought back so many memories. I pushed them aside. This place had felt like a prison, but there were also good memories stored back in there. I stopped suddenly and looked around. Memories. Suddenly I wondered if the memories I held for this place were even real. Maybe they were just written by the veil. My red marks pulsed dark for a moment. I pulled the sleeve of my long sleeve shirt down over my hand. It was of no concern right now. I needed blood. That was a gross thought. I took a breath and continued past the screen door. The heavy oak door lay open, letting the cool summer breeze in. Why don't you get up in my room? I need to talk to my father. I pointed Anton and Mila up the stairs. Second door on the left. What about breakfast? Anton asked. I shook my head and jabbed my finger up the stairs. Mila grabbed his hand and dragged him up after her. After the stairs and a short hallway, I stood in the kitchen. My father stood pouring cups of coffee in mugs. I sat at the table with my hands folded in my lap. My father served us each a cup of coffee, then sat at the head of the table at his usual spot. So Akriana, how is the city? Fine. And school? It's fine. You're not here for money?
No.
He frowned. Then why are you here? I need a DNA sample for a project at school. We are researching our genes. He raised his eyebrows. I thought you were in school for physics? I have to take a required biology course, I lied. He held my eyes. I stared back. I could do this. So you need a cheek swab? He asked. I shook my head. I need blood. It's an in-depth course. He frowned. Did you bring anything to collect it? No, sir. And that's all you're here for? I nodded. Fine. He stood abruptly and left the room. I felt a bit of relief. He wasn't going to fight me on this one. After years of working with the animals, I knew he could do this on his own. It was easier than trying to accidentally on purpose stab him to get his blood. I knew it would take him a while, so I wandered upstairs to my old room. My old room was completely untouched. There was a thin layer of dust on everything. The purple walls still held pictures of horses and ribbons I had won. The bed was made in lime green and purple sheets. Felt up being back here again. I recalled the last night I was here. The fight that had ensued and my angry packing after I told my father I was never coming back. Mila traced the ribbons with her fingers as she walked around the room. She didn't say anything. Anton leaned against the doorframe as he watched. I didn't know you used to ride, Mila said. I shrugged. I left this life. I don't really like to talk about it. What happened? She asked. I left. But why? I shrugged. I was unhappy. Mila started opening up my dresser drawers and peeking inside. Why? I squeezed my eyes shut. A lot of reasons, but mostly I just wanted my own life. I didn't want to be told what to do or how to act anymore. I was just done. Ooh, what's this? Mila said as she pulled a box from my closet. Just trinkets and stuff. What are you looking for? She sat on the bed and opened the box. She started pulling out various items. In a minute, notes, pictures, small toys, and a host of other things littered the bed. My entire life contained to one little box was now scattered out for everyone to see. Oh, and even some baby blankets too, she said. I sighed and sat on the end of the bed. What are you doing? I just wanted to know what my best friend's life was like. Is that so wrong? She asked as she snuggled one of the baby blankets. It's even pink. I rolled my eyes. I was finding it hard to remember that she wasn't her. I could still be wrong about that. You are a bit of a mystery, Anton said. I looked over my shoulder at him. Why are you even here? He shrugged. I have nothing better to do. His eyes looked past me at Mila. I realized he was watching her closely. He hadn't let her out of his sight. Maybe he was getting the same weird feeling too, but he didn't know why. Can we go? I asked as I stood. Mila started stuffing my old things back in the container. Sure, but I'm bringing box. It's like a treasure trove. Fine, but let's hurry. Father doesn't like waiting. I pushed past Anton. He leaned around the door to let me pass. As I went by, he grabbed my arm. Does she seem all right? He asked. I looked back at her as she tucked the baby blankets on the top. I wasn't sure what to say. The last time I asked him about the strange things, he didn't remember. So I just shrugged and pulled away from him. Father was waiting for me downstairs. He frowned as I walked into the kitchen. You didn't drink your coffee, he said flatly.
I'm allergic.
No one is allergic to coffee. I am. Do you have it? I asked with my hand out. He handed me a vial of blood. He had a band-aid on his arm. Father wasn't the lying type, so I was pretty sure he wasn't handing me cow's blood. But still, could I trust my memories? Thank you. Are you going to stay a while? I'm sure your brother would love to see you. You should meet his new wife. He got married? I was a little shocked at that. I didn't think anyone could tolerate Declan, let alone live with him. Last summer. You missed the wedding. I didn't know. You didn't leave an address. I frowned. It didn't matter. I didn't want to go to his stupid wedding anyways. Is Mom still in the hospital? I asked, changing the subject back to my more urgent problem. His face drew down and turned stony. Yes. I nodded, then turned away from him. My next destination was set. I had nothing more to say to him. I wasn't interested in being guilted into coming back and being his slave. This time it was easier to walk away. I met Mila and Anton at the bottom of the stairs. Ready? They both nodded and followed me out. I left without saying another word. I couldn't let them pull me back. I had to be heartless. Chapter 21 Crazy. We pulled into the parking lot of the Randon Medical Clinic. It was a nicer name than Randon Insane Asylum, even though that's exactly what it was. So, what are we doing here? Anton asked. Don't ask so many questions, Mila answered for me. I nodded my thanks to her. I just need to visit my mom. It has been a long time since I have seen here. I won't be long. You're leaving us in here? He asked. I stepped out of the car. Why don't you guys go get lunch and pick me up on the way back? Just grab me a burger or something. Will do, Mila answered. I watched the orange car drive away. Why was it that the car worked so perfectly for her? I turned towards the entrance. I could do this. All I needed was some blood. That shouldn't be so hard. I had no idea how I was going to get it. I was going to need help. I went straight to the bathroom after I entered. I waited for the one woman in the bathroom to leave. I leaned on my hands while I looked into the mirror. Remy, I whispered. The lights flickered and dimmed. We really need to stop meeting like this, came his deep gravelly voice from behind me. In the mirror I could see his dark form. The red ember flew about his shoulder. Do you recommend some other place I can meet you? He shrugged. What do you want? How do I get my mother's blood? That's for you to figure out. I'm just the information guy. The red ember flickered and buzzed at his shoulder. You're not much help. There's not much I can do. I'm bound by a lot of rules. Whose rules? His mouth grew tight. Fine, don't answer. I'll figure it out. I washed my hands. The lights brightened around me as he left. I had to figure this out. I didn't have any paperwork to request a blood sample. I doubted they would buy the genetic sample for biology class. I left the bathroom shaking my hands dry. As I approached the front desk, a tired-looking man sat at the counter tapping at his keyboard. Can I help you? He asked in a bored tone without looking up. I'm here to see Isabel Hatfield. He paused his work. And you are? Her daughter. He eyed me suspiciously. ID. I dug through my heavy tote bag, then handed him my driver's license. He studied it closely by flipping it back and forth a few times, checking to see if it was real. You may wait in the visiting room. Can I have a private visit? No, we don't do that anymore for legal reasons. Go to the visiting room. She will be out shortly. I held his gaze for a few moments before I turned away. Talk about someone with trust issues. What did he think I was going to do? Stab her? I chuckled to myself as I followed the signs. Unfortunately, that may be exactly what I'd have to do. I had always hated this place. It haunted me in my dreams. A part of me felt like I had always been here. I used to visit Mom on her birthday every year, but I hadn't since I left home. Even then it was hard to come. I hated seeing her like that. She was so incoherent. It was almost like she wasn't in there anymore. But occasionally she would come to, and the things she said never made sense. Darkness, shadows, spirits. Now I was thinking maybe she wasn't crazy after all. Come to think of it, she was the one who always pushed me into learning math and science. She used to make me sit at the kitchen table and study for hours. She didn't care about the other subjects, but I always had to be the top of my class in math. I was 2 years ahead in school in that subject. When I was in middle school, I had to walk to the high school to take classes with the high schoolers. When I was in high school, I was enrolled in online college math, which I took from the library computers. Then she went away. I still continued though. It was the only thing I had left of her before she went completely mad. I sat in the visiting area. There were several tables with 2 chairs each. A couch and TV sat to one side with a man visiting an elderly woman. They sat in silence as they watched a rerun of a crime show. There were so many I couldn't tell which one it was. I was surprised they even let them watch that here. Wouldn't all that blood upset some patients? Blood. My mind shot back to the task. How was I going to get her blood? The door opened. 2 orderlies escorted my mother through the door. She looked unlike how I remembered her. So unlike my dream, if it even was a dream. Her black hair was frizzy. Her eyes were sunken and vacant. She looked more like a prisoner than a patient. Her body was thin and her skin pale. The orderlies led her by the shoulders to my table, then pushed her gently into the seat across from me. I gave them a pointed look as they stood over her. After a moment they stepped back and gave us some room. "Mom, how are you?" I asked. Her eyes looked through me. "Mom." Very slowly and awkwardly she leaned forward and put her arms on table. She wiggled her index finger at me, encouraging me forward. I leaned forward. She beckoned with both index fingers now and slid her hands towards me. I set my hands on the table, then reached towards her. Her hands were cold. They held none of the strength she used to have. Her hands rested over the long sleeves of my shirt just over my wrists. "Mom." "I am fine," she said simply. Her voice was as thin as her frail form. "How is college?" "I couldn't afford it. I dropped out last semester." Her eyes closed briefly as if she was in pain. "Have you been keeping up with your studies?" "What's the point? I wasn't the top of my class in college. How will I ever land a job, let alone make it into the PhD program? Let's face it, I wasn't meant to do this. Why did you push so hard? I should have just been a farmer like Dad. But it's too late. I burned those bridges because you made me. Everything came out in such a rush. I couldn't stop all the pain, hurt, and disappointment. I had bottled it up for so long inside, it just came pouring out. Kira. You can do better." She didn't elaborate. She squeezed my wrists tighter. "What am I supposed to do? I can barely make rent and food. I'm paying down these outrageous loans and I can't land a job with half a degree. I'm just stuck." She shook her head slowly. "Don't be disappointed. That doesn't help me." Warmth spread to my wrists. I looked down. Beneath her hands my blue shirt was stained red with blood. All my problems and bitching seemed pointless now as my mind came back to the task at hand. I looked up. How did even she know? Was she really there in my dream? She told me to find the blood and now she was giving it to me. "For the darkness?" I whispered. She nodded ever so slightly. I brought my hands away quickly before anyone saw and hid them in my lap. Blood pooled on the table beneath her wrists. "Not again," the orderly said as he stepped forward. "Visiting time is over. You can't keep doing this to yourself." I stood as they started taking my mother away. "Doing what? What does she keep doing?" The other orderly looked over his shoulder at me. "She's been on suicide watch for a while now. I'm sorry, you'd better go. It seems you only make her worse." I watched them drag my mother from the room. The last thing I saw of her was her once luxurious hair, now matted and frizzed as it disappeared out the door. Chapter 22 Family. I walked back to the bathroom, careful to hide my sleeve. My mind spun. Was this all I needed? Was I finished? Had it really been that easy? Once I reached the bathroom, I checked all the stall doors, then hid in the one at the end. "Remy," I said. Immediately the room darkened and the shadow man appeared. He stood in front of me in the wheelchair-accessible stall. The bright ember buzzed around his head. "You rang," he said. "I got it. Mother's blood." I held out my sleeve. "And father's blood." I produced the vial from my pocket and presented them to him. "Now what?" He grimaced. "So, I hate to say this, but that's not your father's blood." I looked down at the vial. Did he give me cow's blood? Oh no. It's his blood. He's just not your father. I narrowed my eyes at him. "Excuse me." "Yeah, he's not your father. I've been there since you were conceived." I blinked. A little mortified and more than a little annoyed. "And you couldn't share this fact before that really awkward encounter with my father?" "Your adoptive father," he corrected. I gave him a hard look. I think it was mostly shock, but I couldn't seem to process this new thought. My father wasn't my father. I didn't really feel upset, even though I know I should be. I kept staring at Remy, then raised my eyebrows at him. He shrugged his shoulders a couple of times. "What can I say? I'm bound by the rules. I can't just say stuff like that. I feel like this was something fairly important you could have shared with me when we started this whole damn quest. My friend's life is on the line and you act like it's all some game." It was his turn to narrow his eyes. "I know it's not a game. I'm very well aware of the stakes." "Fine. Whatever." Tell me where I can find my real father so we can have a super awkward conversation about him giving me his blood. Remy stayed silent. I take it you can't tell me. Remy held up his hands in a helpless gesture. His handsome face was tempering my anger and turning it into annoyance. If it had been anyone else, I would be jumping up and down cursing at them. Instead, I just said, fine. Go away. I'll do it myself. The bathroom lightened again. I exited the stall. I rolled my bloody sleeves up so the drying blood wouldn't be seen, then shoved my hands in my pockets. How was I going to find a guy I'd never met? I thought back to all the people I remembered when I was little, when my mom was still around. I couldn't think of any weird uncles or men that came around to visit. It was all neighbor moms and 4-H friends. There was no one suspicious that I remembered. Maybe that was why father had never visited mom in this place. Maybe he found out and was mad at her. Dumping her in the loony bin was as good as divorce, I guess. Maybe someone else visited her here. Maybe that someone was my real father. I spun on my heel. I reached the front desk that held the same unsmiling man. I turned on as much charm as I could muster. Hi there. My mom was saying this guy visits her, but I don't know him. Do you think I could check the logs and see if I can figure out who this guy is? Only relatives are allowed to visit. Okay, well maybe he is an uncle. I'm her daughter. Can I just take a look? The man glared at me. I held his stare. He tapped a few keys on the keyboard without looking away, then finally looked at the screen. No one has visited Isabel Hatfield except you since she has been here. My heart hurt a little at hearing that. Even my brother never came to see her. Maybe he knew too. I thought for a minute. Does she have any mail? Does she get letters from anyone? He shook his head, then stopped halfway.
No.
But I think she did have an outgoing mail that was returned. He searched through a stack of paperwork, then through another. After a few minutes, he produced a letter in a red envelope. Will that be all? I took the letter and nodded. I left without another word. As I walked through the hallway back to the entrance, I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of paper with 2 words. I stopped mid-step. The paper read, Matvey Popov. Like Popov. Like Mila Popov. What the hell? My mind whirled. Was this what I was looking for? She showed up in my dream. She gave me the blood. She sent the letter. Was this man who was possibly Mila's father my father too? I had a million questions. All of them I wanted to talk about with Mila, but Mila was the darkness. The very thing I was trying to get rid of. I rubbed my temples. How was I going to get this done, and why did it have to be me? The vertigo threatened me, spinning the room about as I walked. I grabbed for the wall to catch my balance. I pulled against it, blinking my eyes until the room settled. I dragged my body through the door towards the waiting car. I fumbled with the damn door handle until it finally wiggled open. The rusted hinges clanged shut after I got in. Is everything okay? Mila asked. You're looking a little pale. I managed a nod. Where to now? She asked. I shook my head. Wherever. I don't care. Mila gave me a long look, then pressed the accelerator. The engine hummed as the car struggled forward. I slouched down in the slippery brown vinyl seat. I felt so lost. I tucked the envelope in my tote bag turned purse. How did I even broach the subject with Mila/not Mila? By the way, I might be your sister. Hey, where's your gangster father at? Or even, what's your dad's name? Oh, why? None of these were good openers. All of these had strings attached to them. And if Mila was the darkness, then why would she answer them? Maybe the darkness didn't know of a spell that would expel it from the body. That seemed unlikely. If I was a big nasty magical entity, I would certainly know all the ways it could be thwarted and make contingency plans for them. No, I had to be smart. I eyed Mila again. Maybe I was just crazy. But even then, who was I to be battling some magical evil anyway?
No.
I couldn't do this. I had no chance. I couldn't save Mila. Who was I kidding? I couldn't even take care of myself.